Hey, Raising Athletes podcast fans, Kirsten here, and I have to share my new favorite hydration secret with you. Corvive's Hydrate in pink lemonade. If you're looking for the ultimate hydration boost, this is it. Corvive's Hydrate is an NSF certified for sport, trusted by 4 Major League Baseball teams and 3 military bases. With 6 grams of pure organic cane sugar, it ensures you absorb all the electrolytes you need. And get this, it has 3 times the electrolytes and 4 times less sugar than those leading brands. Plus, it's developed using the World Health Organization's standards for oral rehydration solutions, making it the equivalent of a bag of IV fluids. Best of all, there are no artificial dyes or sweeteners. It's so perfect for the entire family. You can drink it any time of day, before, during, or after workouts or sports. So say goodbye to sugary juices and hello to superior hydration with Corvive's Hydrate in pink lemonade. Visit corvive.com. That's CORVIVE.com. And use promo code Kirsten. That's KIRSTEN for 30% off your order. Try it today and feel the difference. Hello, and welcome to the Raising Athletes podcast. My name is Kirsten Jones. I'm a peak performance and sports parenting coach. I love helping people figure out what's getting in their way, what's holding them back, releasing the limitations, and getting the life that they want. Now almost coming up on 1 year of my book coming out, Raising Empowered Athletes. How do we raise not only strong athletes, but extraordinary people? And raising 3 athletes of my own. So I've worn kind of all the hats. And one thing that I know as a parent of now 23, 20, and 18-year-olds, sports is a metaphor for life. Sports is about how do we win? How do we fail? What did I learn from it that I can apply to in my life beyond the court, pitch, pool? And I love having our guest on today. It's going to be such a great conversation, Olivia Zelon, to talk about what happened in her life that actually brought her to the point that she is now. So welcome, Olivia. I'm so excited to talk to you, and also a former volleyball player as well. So I'm sure we have a lot in common to chat about.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm very excited.
So let's start with you. I like hearing the backstories, right? How did we get here? We discussed before we started recording, we're actually probably only 30 minutes apart from each other in real life, but it's good that we're online so people can see both of us. But talk about your childhood, how you got into the sport. Did you play multiple sports? And your journey through volleyball.
Yeah, so I am the third kid, and I'm sure a lot of parents will understand as the youngest, you're like brought along to all of the sporting events and thrown in the back of the car. And so I had 2 older siblings that were very involved in sports. And so I would just go everywhere. And I was at one of my sister's beach volleyball tournaments when I was, I think, like 8 years old. And they had one girl who had gotten sick that morning, and her partner showed up and she didn't have a partner. So they were like, well, Olivia's the only one here. And I was like literally 8 or 9. And so I jumped in and I ended up actually winning the volleyball tournament. And my sister was not too stoked about it because she was like 13 in her prime. And so that's kind of what skyrocketed me into volleyball. But my whole life I played a ton of sports. I was the only girl on the flag football team. I still am like friends with all of the guys that were on my flag football team. And it's this running joke that I was like the most competitive and made boys cry. And now I'm like their best friends. So I was always involved in sports. But it got really serious probably when I was in 7th grade, and recruiting for volleyball is pretty young. It's changed now, but when I was an athlete, I started getting a lot of college letters and offers when I was in 7th, 8th grade. So,
What
yeah,
did that feel like? Do you remember your 13-year-old self, and how did you handle that?
I remember like it was very exhilarating at the beginning, and I was seeing all these college letters come in. And back in the day, that's like how it would start. You actually filled out questionnaires. And then in 8th grade, it became pretty real. Like I was getting unofficial offers, but like I knew that this was where my life was going. Um, and then actually 9th grade is when I committed. And I think I didn't realize what you're getting yourself into, kind of, because you're so young and you're looking at things from a ninth grade mindset versus like when you actually get to college. So all of the questions you're asking and what you're looking for is way different than when you actually get there. So it was so exciting. And I think it really like shaped my entire life. But if I were to go back and do it again, I think I probably would have like asked different questions and just made sure that I was setting myself up correctly.
I know we want to get into your ultimate story about how you ended up there, but we do have a lot of people that are listening that do have athletes that are maybe in your position. And now, as we know, the rules have changed that it can't be till June 15th of your sophomore year where they can officially start recruiting you. But to your point, which I think is such a good one, right? That frontal lobe is wide open at 15, and you probably want to know, where the kids get to hang out, or like what color the uniforms are, or like you don't really have ideas about maybe what you want to study. My joke is always like, your 15-year-old doesn't know what they want for dinner. How could they possibly know what they want to do 4 years from now? So what was the process you went through with your parents to decide, did you have dozens of offers or just a couple offers, or how did you navigate that?
I had quite a few offers when I was deciding where I was going to go. And I'd like to say that it was like this educated, really looking into all the details. But the truth of the matter was, it was not that. I was like, I knew I wanted to win a national championship. And volleyball, when I was in ninth grade, was my everything. So it was like, okay, what school has the best volleyball program? And that was like pretty much it. I tell everyone, I was like, I committed to school before I even started driving, which is just a wild concept to me. So when I talk to girls now, I'm like, there's certain questions that I wish I asked. Like, I was looking at school for volleyball. I wasn't even really thinking about academics and what I was going to major in and things like that. But one of the main questions that I didn't ask is like, you could have a phenomenal coaching staff, but every athlete is coached differently. And so making sure that you ask the questions about like, okay, what's your coaching style? Like putting yourself in situations to see how the coaches and you would get along is so important, and something that like you're not thinking about until you get there, and then it can become an issue. So I think there's just a lot of things that I wish that I would have thought about, but I was like, okay, I am going into the offices. I see all these national champion trophies, like sign me up. Where do I sign? And so I actually do think that the new rule where you have to wait is so important and so good for girls, especially young women who don't exactly know what they're going to do and what path they want to go down after sports.
Not dissimilar from you. I mean, I didn't have a ton of offers. I grew up in Montana, so nobody even knew I existed. But when I tried out for the junior national team, the San Diego State assistant coach was there. And similar to you, though, I was like, San Diego sounds great. I'd never met the coach. I'd never been on the campus. I'd never, checked out the facilities or the academics or any of that. So actually, through that experience, I ended up transferring to William and Mary and having an amazing experience at William and Mary. But I did create, and I'll do a little plug right now. You can go onto the website right now, Kirsten Jones Inc., and I have a recruiting document, what to ask. And I asked a bunch of Division I coaches, my former teammate, Jen Petrie, who's the coach at USD, a bunch of D1, both basketball, volleyball, which is where my kids play. But what are the questions I should be asking? And then what are the questions that the coach is probably thinking about, so that I'm prepared to answer those too, right? Like it's wearing both of those hats. And I love the point you made about, you just assume, okay, well, there's banners hanging on the wall, it must be a great fit for me. What would you go back and tell your 15-year-old self now? What would you ask that would help you figure out whether that was the right fit or not?
I think just like when I was in college, there was one very pivotal moment for me. Um, the coaching staff, I was like this little ball of energy. Like when I was in high school, especially when I was playing, it was just this like energy that came out of me that now I think got me to where I was, because it can motivate a team. It can like really get you going. And part of that too was like I was always moving. And as a libero, like that can work in your favor, but also some coaches are like, no, we want you grounded, we want you stopped. And so there was one day where I was on the bus. We were actually about to play Stanford, I think. And my coach was like, naming all of these phenomenal liberos. And he was like, you're playing exactly like them. And so in my head, I'm like, I'm crushing it. Like, he's naming literally the top 5 liberos in the world right now. And he was like, but that's not how we play here. Like, you need to be stopped, you need to be grounded. And I realized in that moment, I was like, so then why would you recruit me? Because that's just not how I play. And so that was something that I was like, I didn't think about that when I was getting recruited. Like, I didn't think about the system that they ran. I knew that I played a certain way, and I thought, okay, well, if you're going to recruit me, then it probably makes sense. So just understanding like what type of athlete you are, what type of athlete they need, how they coach. Like, I'm a very positive person. I like positive reinforcement. If you have a coach that like likes to yell, like, and that's how he pumps you up, you guys aren't gonna get along well. So there's so many things that just as I was there, I was like, these are things that like one day if my kids play sports, I need to make sure that I'm preparing them and not just going to the school with like the best program, because it doesn't always work out that way.
Such great points. And ironically, most kids at that stage in life probably haven't dated or haven't dated seriously. But what I like to do is it's like a date, right? Like you're trying to find a fit for both of you. And I think what happens a lot is we get so enamored. Ooh, X brand school is recruiting me. Wouldn't that be great? And we don't think about it from a quid pro quo. Like, what am I going to also get out of that? And to your point about, I always ask, like, how long has your staff been there? Like, if they have a rotating staff, there might be issues. And now with the transfer portal and NIL, it's gotten even crazier. But how many of the athletes stay? Are they happy there? Do they, do you have a lot of new faces all the time? But some of those can become, good indicators. There is no perfect litmus test, but I say at least if you make an educated choice, then you can be like, oh, okay, I knew this coming in, and I'm going to have to work through it, but that's okay because I chose it for these 7 reasons and not these 3, right?
Totally. Yep. I agree with you.
Awesome. So let's get into how you got to where you are today. And I just love your story so much because I actually think of the guy who started Tom's Shoes. Do you know his story?
Yep.
Yeah, right. Like, that's what this is. I'm seeing how this is just going to go big time. So I'll let you tee it up. I won't even spoil the punchline.
Yeah. So my parents actually met at bodybuilding camp. My mom was like an aerobics instructor in the fitness world, and my dad was actually throwing the camp. And so I grew up in a household that was like always thinking about sports nutrition and what you had to feed yourself in order to perform at your best. And we have this like running joke in our family that we saw a dietitian when I think I was in like 5th grade, and we would have scales at breakfast and write down how much protein we had. And it wasn't so much to like put us on a diet. It was just so that we understood what we were putting into our bodies and how that affected us. And so when I got to college, I was under the assumption that most elite athletes were thinking this way. And I quickly realized that like I was the outlier and I was like the weird one who had way more knowledge than most people. And so my roommate at the time, she was from like North Texas or somewhere in Texas. And we just grew up living 2 different lifestyles. Like my parents live 3 minutes from a Whole Foods, Pavilions. Now there's Erewhon, and that's not very common for most people. And so while we were there, I realized the impact that sports had on my game and like what carbohydrates can do for you before you work out versus if you have protein after you work out. And so I said to her one day, I was like, Bree, you're this phenomenal athlete. She's now an alternate she could be going to the Olympics in a couple months. And like, just imagine how much better you could have been if you started eating good before you got to school. And so kind of that was what made me start to realize it is as athletes, as parents, like I'm sure this is what a lot of your podcast is about, is like you're doing so much for your kids. You're doing so much for yourself in hopes to get to play in college or play professionally. And mental health and like mental performance now is starting to become super important. But what a lot of people are forgetting and neglecting is sports nutrition and how that can really impact your game. And so I always knew that because of the way that I was raised, but most athletes do not. And so if you're going to put in all of that time and money going to practice and private coaching, why not start to actually think about sports nutrition from a younger age versus when you just get to college?
So can I
So
ask you, sorry, can I stop you one sec? Your parents, then were you in a household where like there's no sugar? Were they like really religious about what they ate and how they ate? Or was there, do you feel like there was a balance, or what was their approach in, because kids like sugar, or at least ones that have been introduced to it, right? Like, because I get that question a lot. Like, my kid only wants to eat it, fast food. How do I get them to eat healthier? What was your parents'
totally.
approach?
Yeah, so sugar in our house is not like a bad thing. I think when you overdo it, if you're having like Captain Crunch every morning, yeah, there's a certain degree of like that's probably not the best fuel for your body. But like carbohydrates, sugar, that is an important part. Like you're getting that into your system before you work out. So it wasn't so much about like super clean, healthy, like no sugar, no carbs. It was okay, if you're going to eat Skittles at night, it's actually better for your body if you eat protein first. So that's what these nutritionists and dietitians were teaching us is like, don't cut anything out. Just learn how to do it so that your body can still run properly. Um, and that's what I think is really important because with social media now and with TikTok and all of these like fast trend diets, what you don't want to tell a 12-year-old is like, you can't eat sugar, you can't do this, because that's not real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to hide it, they're going to go to school, they're going to buy it. So it wasn't about cutting things out. It was about, okay, I want to eat these things. So how can I like manage my food plan around that? So I think that was like a really important thing for me because when I got to college, I lived on the basketball floor. Like these basketball players are eating whatever they want. Like if you tell them, no, 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 you can't have sugar, they're going to be like, that's not possible. Like, let us play. We know what we're doing. So it's just about learning and using that knowledge so that you can help yourself.
So fabulous. And I so agree. And that's what I hear a lot. People are like, well, parents are like, well, they're all or nothing. And I mean, I don't think it's realistic to expect your 15-year-old's going to go to a birthday party and not eat some sugar, right? And to live in such, I mean, maybe you know the story too, but Todd Marinovich, right? He went to play at USC, but supposedly he never ate sugar before he went to college. And then he got to college, and I wrote about it in the book. He kind of freaked out and ended up getting into drugs and in and out of prison and all of this, and it came from where nothing bad is allowed, and all of that does is cause, particularly now with social media and watching what your friends are doing, is okay, now I'm just going to find a way to sneak it. And
Totally.
that's not why we're looking to make athletes for life, in that you're making healthy choices whether you're going to get on the volleyball court or not, right?
Completely, completely.
Okay, so what are the types of things that you started playing around with to say, okay, how can I help my teammates and myself get the nutrition we need?
So my mom was making these, we used to call them blazer bars. My brother was on this basketball team called the West Side Blazers. And it was a bunch of like NBA players' sons, like really great athletes on this team. And she used to say that she would drive kids to practice and everyone would show up and like 3 or 4 kids would have food for the whole day. And so she started making these, it was basically like banana bread with protein in it. And so she would bring them and everyone knew them as blazer bars. So when I got to college, my mom started sending them to me and I'd give them to Bree and like they were just always in my dorm room. So I started kind of tinkering with the recipe. Um, it's kind of an important note, but I didn't know what I wanted to do yet for like the rest of my life, but I knew that I really loved food and I was thinking about maybe going to culinary school one day. So I just started making different food things in my dorm room, like putting in protein powder into yogurt, adding different vegetables into these banana bread bars that my mom was making. And so what I ended up doing was taking this recipe that she was making, which had sugar and butter, and just trying to like refine it and swapping out butter for coconut oil and sugar for agave and making it a little bit healthier. And when I was at UT my first year, they had us drinking beet powder
Mm.
and tart cherry powder. And the way that they would do it is they had a little plastic bottle, and they would put it in there, shake it up, and leave it in our lockers. And like, I grew up eating very healthy. It was hard for me to stomach. So I was like, I can't even, it's not even realistic in the slightest to say, hey, fifth grader Brandon who likes baseball, you should be eating this before you work out. Like, there's no way. So I started adding those to different food products that I was making in my dorm room. And I realized that you can kind of mask the taste in brownies and like baked goods. So I was like, okay, well, what if I put these into the Blazer bars and like the new recipe that I was making?
Is there
And
a kitchen in your dorm?
we did have a kitchen. Yeah, Sandjack had a kitchen in our dorm room. It wasn't in my dorm room, but it was on our floor.
I was going to say, well, we've come a long way. Dorm.
And then my boyfriend at the time was on the baseball team, and he was in an apartment. So like, I kind of had some flexibility.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I started making those, and I would give them just as like girls that I knew, and they started to gain a little bit of popularity. And so I kept refining it. I was doing different flavors. And then it kind of like reached a pivotal point when my boyfriend was playing against a baseball team, and someone else reached out to me from a different school and was like, these are so good. How do we get these in our dorm room? And I was like, I mean, not in our dorm room, in our locker room.
Yeah.
And I was like, So I called my parents. I was like, oh my gosh, like, you never guessed this baseball player. And my mom was like, whoa. Like, you just graduated high school early. I ended up going a semester early. So
Okay.
the past 3 years, I've been like taking different classes and making sure that I was ready to go to college early. And now she's like, and now you're trying to like start a business from your dorm room. Like, that is not what you were in school for. So I
Which,
was like,
by the
okay.
way, had you declared a major yet? What were you thinking of studying? Business or?
I was thinking business, but I heard that like being an athlete and being in the business school was like very, very rare, and the hours were kind of crazy. So
Yeah.
I was going down the advertising, like marketing route.
Okay.
But at that point, I don't even think I declared yet. It was still, I was really just there for volleyball at that point. So I was like, okay, she's right. My parents are right. I don't have time for this. I need to focus on what I'm doing. And then I actually ended up quitting volleyball my second year. And the way that came up was I've always been very, very goal oriented. Like, when I was little, I wanted to play for the best volleyball school in the country. Like, I always had goals that I set for myself. And I remember being on the bus going to an away game once, and I was like, what is my goal here? Like, am I trying to play on the Olympic team? Like, do I want to play overseas? And I kind of just realized that like my goals weren't actually volleyball down the line. It was, I wanted to like have a great career and like make a name for myself it wasn't even really the business world. It was just in a world outside of sports. And so I remember that night I was like, I think I should get an internship and like start looking into what I want to do in life. And I talked to my parents about it, and they know me. Like, if you look at my walls, I'm always like writing down my goals for the week, goals for the year, goals for the next 5 years. And it just didn't align with my life. Like, playing on this team didn't really align with what I wanted to do for the next couple of years. And so I decided to transition out of volleyball. And so the way that this happened was I started reaching out to like every single brand in Austin, like yogurts that I liked. I liked this coffee brand in Austin, and I messaged them on Instagram, and I would email them and be like, hey, if you guys need any additional help, like, you just let me know. I can do whatever you need. So there was one time where I finished practice, and this is so crazy. I finished practice, and I went to a local Whole Foods, and I was doing a sampling program, and I was wearing a hairnet and gloves and passing out samples of stuff. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is so crazy. But it started to teach me about like what else is out there. And so the year after I stopped playing sports, I did that nonstop. I reached out to everyone that I could. I did stuff for free. I did an internship. I had like brand ambassador roles, and then COVID happened. And during COVID, everyone was obviously at home, but I got this internship at a food lab. So I was working in person in a food lab, making different ingredients, working with suppliers. And it showed me like this whole new life of food and beverage and how to scale a brand and build a brand. And I tell everyone this, and like, I think this is important for this podcast because when I quit volleyball, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And it was my identity for so long. But I told my parents, I was like, I know whatever I do next, I'm going to be successful because, like, the same passion that I put into sports my whole life and setting up goals and making sure that I was getting to them, I'm going to do in the next thing. Mm-hmm. And so when I started learning about the food world, I was like, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to prepare myself so that I can reach the next goal, which was to eventually start a brand. So I reached out to everyone I could. I was like, if I'm going to start a business, I need to know how to do finance. I need to know how to do accounting. So at the internship I was at, I was on the like brand creation food science team, but in our free time, I reached out to our CFO. I was doing Excel documents. I was doing QuickBooks projects. I was calling my friends that were doing finance in school. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I need you to teach me because I need to learn it for myself. And I also need to complete this thing for our CFO. So I like to tell everyone this, like when your life stops with sports might be done, but your mindset that got you to that place is not done. Like that's going to carry on to anything that you do in life, and it will set you up for success no matter what you're doing. So that is kind of how I got into the food world.
And all the while you're at UT, you're still a student?
Yeah, okay. I'm still a student. So we went, I was a junior at this point. We went to online school because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And so now I have an internship. And then I think it was like 3 or 4 months into or maybe it was like 2 months into the internship, they offered me a full-time job. And I talked to my parents about it, and school was still online. And I had just kind of quit volleyball. So that was a full-time job. So mm-hmm. I told them, I was like, look, I can handle this. Like I can be working full-time and still do school. And so I did that. And I was living at home because we were home for COVID, and I didn't really have that many expenses because we weren't doing anything. And so I ended up saving a bunch of money. And then someone reached out to me that was doing consulting in the food and beverage world. And they were like, we think you would be really great at this. We see how you've been like dipping your feet into every group. We think you'd be great at consulting. So I started consulting at the same time, and I ended up making like a crazy amount of money. And so I remember telling we were doing our finances, like I had to submit my taxes.
Loving this story, by the way. I mean, this is just, you're the poster child for everything that I talk about, which is, sorry to interrupt you, but it's like all the parents say this, because this is the problem, right? It's a $37 billion business now, youth sports, right? Less than 5%, maybe 7% will play D1, D2, D3, NAIA, any level. If I tell you it's going to rain today in LA and there's a 3%, 5% chance of rain, you're not taking an umbrella. But yet we're putting all of our resources, all of our time, all of our hopes and dreams on our kid having that outcome, which of course, like you did too. But what you did was took all of that knowledge around, and I'm the exact same way. I wanted to play on the national team and I came out of Montana. Like, I don't even know where I had that idea, but wouldn't that be fun, right? Like, I never got to the national team, but I worked for Nike for 15 years, right?
Yep.
So same thing. Like, you're taking all of those skill sets that you learn, and parents who are listening to this and athletes that are listening to this, because parents will say, well, why am I paying all this money if they're not even going to play in college? Totally. You're missing the point altogether. The point is not about the trophy or the podium. The point is about this skill set that you even have again, kudos to you for like picking up the phone and DMing and doing the work so that you can learn about what you don't know about, so that and all you need to know, I think we get over our skis a bit. We're like, well, I don't know how would a 22-year-old start a company? Well, you don't need to know that. You just need to know what your next step is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
So you make all this money doing this internship or consulting, right? So this is 2022?
So yeah, this is 2022. So I was working at this brand, and I remember talking to someone who worked there who had dealt with a bunch of different companies and just understood like how you scale a business. And I asked her, I was like, how much money do you need to start a company? She gave me three numbers. She was like, this is what you should have at the beginning. This is what you're going to need like a year in if it's actually going well. And then this is what like you should raise the first time you raise money. So I was like, okay, that's a lot of money. Like, this is not a cheap industry. This is something that like you have to have inventory. There's a lot of regulations. And so I wrote that number down. I'm really, really big on manifesting. So I wrote that number down. And within a year working there and doing all the consulting, I ended up making the most amount of money that I needed. That she had given me three numbers. I made that much money.
Third.
And I told my parents, I was like, I don't really need to go to an investor. Like, I believe in this. I made the money myself. I'm going to launch this company and see what happens. And so that was literally like in my life, I think that was the most pivotal point because I set a goal, I wrote it down, and then I was like, I don't really need anyone else to make this happen. Like, I trust myself and I did the work. And if it doesn't work out, then so be it. Like, I'm a junior in college. What's this money? If I can make it now, I can make it later. And so I did it myself. And I remember every move I made up to that point, I was like listening to different people's opinions and feedback, but I had such a clear vision of where I thought this would go and what I wanted it to look like and what I wanted the brand to be. And now I was in a position where I was like, well, I can lean on myself. I don't need to like listen to everyone else because this is my little baby. So that was how it got started. And it grew from there. And there was so many times that I mean, still today, like there's days where I wake up and I'm like, what am I doing? Like literally, what am I doing? But then there's other moments where I'm like watching the NFL and there's OUTPLAY on the sidelines. And I'm like, oh, that's why I'm doing this. Because like you're learning as you go, you're setting goals, and you're like actually seeing your actions transition into success or into failures. And it's so important just at any stage in life to like have those goals and to work towards it and to see where that takes you.
So one of my chapters in the book is all about your toolbox, your mental toolbox. So much of, yes, you need to have certain skill sets to play volleyball, but so much of what we need to do in life is about what's between your, between your ears. So I just taught a course that I'm going to teach again in the fall. And you're doing an ad for it right now because it's all about visualizing what is it I want, getting clear and specific on what are the goals that I want to do, focusing on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And then the how appears. You could be like, I don't know what the number was, $300,000. How am I going to get $300,000? No. What do I want to do and why do I want to do it? The clearer you get on that, oh, look, the money appears. And people, I think, get confused with manifesting because they think it has something to do with sitting on your couch, nodding or, praying and that the thing happens. But what you're talking about is specific actions that you do on a daily basis. And I'm guessing it doesn't always go well, that sometimes you hit walls, sometimes you hear no. Like the fact that you're reaching out to 100 companies, I'm sure not 100 companies said, sure, come work with us, right?
Absolutely not. No.
So how do you overcome those things? Like what is your mindset when you hear no?
I think that just as an athlete, like, and I was gonna go talk to the UCLA volleyball team, and beforehand I was thinking about like what you're gonna say. And I think one of the most important things and something that you don't realize as an athlete is you show up every single day, and there could be 3 months where you don't get any better or where you don't actually see yourself getting better. So you go and you're putting in the work and you're putting in the work, and you might have one day where you're playing bad, you might have one day where you're playing good, you might go back, but you keep showing up every single day because that's what sports is. And so that's kind of what I've used in the business world. Like, okay, today's not my day. Like I've reached out to 6 schools and no one's getting back to me, but I'm going to show up and do the same thing tomorrow because that's what I've been doing for the past 17 years of my life. Like you just keep showing up and you keep putting in your best effort. And incrementally, you don't even see it. You're getting a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And then you look back a year from now and you're like, oh my, like, I didn't even realize all of these things were happening, but you're so much better now in the business world. Like, I've gotten so many teams, but if I look at it from a day-to-day basis, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is not going as quickly as I want it to. So I think the no's, like you've kind of been training for the no's, because if you were an athlete and you were getting yeses or you were getting so much better every single day, I mean, that's not possible for anyone, not even like Kobe Bryant was doing that. So I think I don't really look at them as no's. I just look at them as like, okay, it's getting me a tiny bit better, and it's training myself.
There's a saying like you inoculate yourself against the nose. And what does that mean? It means that you do it so much that it doesn't phase you, right? Like, I think when we, like, even writing this book took me 7 years because I wanted to get a publisher. I had a vision for what I wanted. And if you sit there and worry about, how am I going to get the book deal? How am I going to get the bars made? How am I going to, you get frozen by all of that because you're worried about the no. But
Yeah.
when you just start taking little swings, which is what sounds like your whole, I mean, is this something that your parents have modeled? Is this just, are your siblings like this? Is this just how you came out? Or how did you think you acquired this skill set?
So my parents, and especially my dad, he used to do these things with us every night called questions. And I didn't realize it until I started this business that it was actually like positive affirmations that we would say every single night to ourselves. And he would he would go from like room to room. And it started when my brother was little. He came up with one question, would ask him every single night, and my brother had to like repeat it back to him. And then as he was in the business, my dad was in business, he just started learning different quotes and different ways of life and would turn them into little questions. And so it grew from one question to 6 to now I think it's about 12 questions. And so part of it is like I was telling myself every single day, like, no matter what you do in life, you can do it. You can complete it. And so these series of questions, I think, really like raised me to think, okay, I can be my best self. Like I am capable of doing extraordinary things. And so I think that was a really big part of just when I wanted to start the business, I was like, hey, I can do this. Like I know that I'm capable if I put my mind into something. So I think that was a kind of a pivotal thing for me, but my parents are like super, super supportive. I remember when I told them that I was quitting volleyball, I literally can like see it in my head. I was sitting on my dorm room floor, and up to that point, there was no like massive, massive failures I'd had in my life. And I remember sitting there and I was like, I feel like I've kind of failed at this. Like it was my goal for so long and I didn't reach the point where I wanted it to be. But I knew that my goal now going forward was something different. And they were so positive about that. And they let me, and they like fully believed in everything I was doing. And so I think now that I look back on it, I'm like, wait, I had to get to that point because now it's gotten me to where I am with OUTPLAY. And we talked about manifesting, but one of the big things is I wrote down like I wanted to be on the USA Olympic team one day. So obviously when I quit volleyball, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Like that was something that I just never was going to reach. And then last summer, I got a DM from my old teammate, and she was playing in Croatia on the USA women's team. And she texted me and she was like, hey, I'm in Croatia right now, and I just pulled out OUTPLAY from our snack bag. And she was like, you made it to the Olympic team. And I remember reading that, and I was like, yes, I didn't make the Olympic team, but like I still got to the point. It just is a different way. And so that's now something that like anything that happens in my life, if I don't start working with a team that I want to work with, or if I get a no, I'm like, well, maybe this just is a different way to bring me to the same result. And I just don't know it yet. And so I think that was like, it's been a big mindset shift for me. If opportunities fall through, I'm like, this is happening for a greater reason. And I just really need to trust the process.
You're so inspiring. And I think this generation, there's a great book out right now called The Anxious Generation, and what's happening because kids are so on their phones all the time. You now have a generation of kids that have never had life without a cell phone, that all of their validation is coming through, and invalidation is coming through what they're seeing everybody else do, and no agency over, I can do this. I've got this, right? I met with a team yesterday, a club team, 13-year-olds, and they literally to a person sat there and said, girls, and said, I'm not enough, basically. Like, and they have this belief that if I say I'm enough, but I'm not as good as she is, then that makes me a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about the piece of understanding who you are and how do you get to that. I mean, again, not everything worked out perfectly for you, but somehow understanding that I'm okay. I'm enough in that I may not make the national team, or I may not even get to play on the squad this year. I may be a practice player, but I'm here and I'm a contributor and I have a role that is valuable regardless of whether I'm the starting libero or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was one day I was sitting in my locker room in college, and I had redshirted my first year, and I was sitting there and I just was like, this is not how I expected college to go. Like, I always thought I was going to like really love college sports and eventually go and play after school. And I just remember sitting there and I was like, not why is this happening, but just like, this is not how I imagined it going. And I sat there for a second and I was like, wait, Olivia, you are at the number one volleyball school in the country right now. Like, when I was 12 years old, I dreamed about this. I was like, I'm going to play for the number one volleyball. I did it. Like, I got there. And so, yeah, it's not the outcome that I wanted, but like, you need to take a step back and you need to think about how far you've come, and like realize for a second that everything that you wanted in life is like, I got to that point and now it's just going to lead me somewhere else. And so I think it's so hard to hear about younger kids, and especially in sports, because you're put in a position where like you're on a pedestal of competition and are you going to make the team and things like that, where there are like other kids and other people that aren't at that level yet just because they're not applying to schools, they're not there yet. And so I just remember thinking like, all of the work that I've put in has led me to this point, and I need to remember like those days, because it's not the outcome that I thought it was going to be, but it's still getting me there and it's still going to train me for the next stage in my life. And so just understanding like really to my core now, and when I talk to youth athletes, it's so important to realize that like where you are in this very moment is exactly where you're supposed to be, because it's either teaching you something, like the universe, God, whatever your religion is, it doesn't matter. It's putting you in a position to learn and to understand. And you might not even realize it until 6 years down the road. And you're like, oh, I was like getting trained mentally so that I can get over that now, or so that I've learned that now. And so when I realize that now, when things happen to me, I'm like, okay, what is this going to teach me? And like, what do I need to take from this situation? And there's so many times that I'm like, I have those like aha moments. I'm like, this is why.
Such a great thing is to frame it as a question, like, what am I supposed to learn? Okay, this didn't go the way I thought it would. And either I can retell the story of how, oh, and it sucked, and that wasn't the what I signed up for, or they weren't, the coach was bad, or the team didn't like me, or whatever your story becomes. Or you can say, flip it. Gosh, what was I supposed to learn? And what is that? How can I use that as my superpower for what I'm going to do next? Which sounds like you're very good at doing, by you're very forward focused, right? You're looking a lot to what is in front of me versus spending time looking in the rearview mirror about good or bad, right?
Yep. I have this quote on my wall and I like look at it every single day when I'm working, and it says, to achieve big things, you have to have big dreams. And I think it's so important now because with social media and like sometimes you just don't give yourself a break to like sit down and close your eyes and think about like what you really want in life. Because in order to get to that stage, you have to be able to see yourself doing it. Like you have to be able to even have the dream before you can execute on what's next. And so you talked about this before, but like visualization and manifesting is so real. And I think people get like, oh, woo woo manifesting, but they don't understand that it's not like you're just putting an idea out in the universe and you're like, okay, give me this. It's you're actually putting the idea into your head so that you convince yourself that it's possible. And then you start doing little steps. Honestly, most of the time you don't even know that you're putting those steps in or doing the work to get you there, but without actually like thinking you're capable, it's never going to happen. So I talk about visualization all the time. I'm like, you have to see it and you have to be the first one to believe it before things will start happening.
We moved to LA 9 years ago, and I've been, as I said, it took me 7 years to write this. I've had the podcast for 5. I've been doing this at a snail's pace, which has been by design because I have 3 kids. My third one just graduated from high school 2 days ago. So like now it's going to be like, okay, they're launched. So, but all the while that I've been creating this, I thought, I would have these visions of what would it be like. And I met this woman through my son's basketball team. He was in 5th grade or 6th grade at the time. And she's like, oh, I love what you're doing. And I love how you're talking and you're so motivating. She goes, you should talk to my next door neighbor. And I was like, who's your next door neighbor? And she said, Reese Witherspoon. She's doing something with Oprah and they're looking for powerful women like you. And you could totally be on this show she's starting. And I thought, right? And I wasn't ready for that. I was like, me? Who am I? I would never be. And I needed to go on the journey of knowing, yeah, sure, I got that. Yeah, bring her on, right? And when, to your point, when we are ready, when we're willing because we've told ourselves we are enough, the opportunity appears.
Totally. Yeah.
But when we play small and we're like, oh, well, that's not who I am, or I'm not capable of that, then we get more of that too, right? Yeah. So you are so impressive. So may I ask how old you are?
I'm 25.
25, right? So again, I just want people to hear, because again, I think a lot of times we're also conditioned that we'll all have success when I'm 30, when I'm 35, when I've been in the business but the success that you've created has been through your own hard work, dedication, and being willing to pivot. Like when it's not going well, listening to your inner self, like, this isn't what I thought it was supposed to be. And being okay with that. And I think a lot of people feel like, well, I signed up for this 3 more years or whatever. Like, I guess I'm just going to have to finish it off, right?
Yeah.
No, like that's not what this is about.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too is like, you see so many I see so many quotes because I'm like obsessed with quotes, but I used to say things and when I first started OUTPLAY, I like wrote down this list. I actually still have it because I was looking at it the other day and I wrote down a list for the first 5 years of starting the business. And I was like, okay, I want to get into the Chargers. I want to sell to USC. I had this list of teams. Within 6 months, I had like 6 of the 10 teams already purchasing our products, which I thought was like the 5-year plan. But what you don't realize is, okay, I wrote down the LA Chargers so that when I was in the room with someone who was in the Chargers organization, I was like, all right, it's my time now. And it was so unrealistic for me to like start selling to the team at that stage of the business. But I had already seen it happening. I'd already like written it down multiple times so that when it was like the chance that I had, I was like, oh, I got to act on this now. And so I tell everyone, I'm like, you have to almost be unrealistic, because if you're thinking about, if I'm 22 years old and I'm like, all right, it's going to take $250,000 to start a business. No. How am I going to do that? Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. But I was like 22. I'm like, oh, okay, let's do it. How do I make $250,000?
Why not?
Yeah. I'm like, why not me? Okay. And so you have to kind of have that like unrealistic, like mindset in order to get you there, because if you have really big goals, like there's no playbook on how to get there. It's, you got to just take chances. You got to listen to yourself. You got to listen to your gut. Um, One of the things that I did was, I don't have here. Our packaging is like very colorful. And I, when I started the business, had a very clear idea of like what I wanted it to look like. However, I'm not a creative. Like I didn't have Photoshop design experiences. And so I reached out to a bunch of different design and graphic design teams. And this business is not cheap. And so I was getting quotes for like 25, 30, $50,000 to design the brand. And I remember like thinking to myself, like, that is so much money. Like, how am I going to make that much money? And I finally found this business, this team that was like, we can do it. We can do everything for $25,000. And I was like, okay, it's a lot of money, but like, if I want to get to the point where I think this is going, I have to be willing to invest. And so I had my last meeting with them, and the head woman was like, what's a company that you aspire to be like? And since I was little, I was obsessed with Nike. Every big game, I would get a new pair of Nikes, and I would like babysit all week to pay for this pair of Nikes because it made me feel so good. And so I told her that. I was like, I think that Outplay is going to be the food version of Nike. Like when you put on a pair of Nikes, you feel like you can do anything. I want that with food. When you eat this, you feel like you can do anything. And I said that to her, and she was like, no, 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 no. Nike's way too big of a company. Like, let's be a little bit more realistic. And I was like, okay, I'm not telling you that Outplay is going to be the next Nike. However, are you even familiar with the brand Nike and how they started? Because it is identical to what I'm doing. Like he started it in his parents' house, which is where this is starting. And so I was like, you know what? Like, respect your opinion. And she said to me, I think this is going to be more of a TikTok brand. And I was like, I think we're not aligned here. So I like hung up the phone, sent them an email, and I was like, so great meeting with you guys. I just think we're on two different pages. Like this probably doesn't make sense to move forward. And I went downstairs, and this was the first time, like I had already been working on the recipe for a year. And I remember saying to my dad, I actually started crying. And I was like, I just don't really know what I'm doing. Like, what am I saying? I'm going to set the next Nike of the food business. Like I'm 20, this is out of control. And he said to me, he said, if you're telling these kids that they need to outwork, outdream, outplay, you can't sit here and cry. Like you need to go upstairs and you need to figure out how to do this. And so I remember going upstairs, and he said, take the night off. Like you're working so hard right now. You're doing consulting. You have a business. You're still in school. Like take the night off. And so I went upstairs and I got in the shower, and I'm crying in the shower. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm out of my mind. And I got out of the shower and I downloaded Photoshop and I designed the whole company myself. And so I ended up saving all that money, but it was more so of the idea of like, if I want to make it work, you can figure it out. And so now if things come up with the design, I'm able to go on my computer and actually do it versus like relying so heavily on a business. And so, like you said before, like in that moment, I was like, okay, well, what is this going to teach me? And now I'm like, oh, I needed to learn these things so that I could bring it to the stage where it is today. So it's just a lot of like trusting yourself, figuring it out, realizing that like things are not going to happen how you think they're going to happen, and just continuing to push forward because there's really no other way.
And I'm sure you know Phil's story about how the swoosh came about, right?
Yep, exactly.
Carolyn Morse, an art designer that they knew at Portland State, and said, would you come up with some logos? And they all agreed that they didn't really like it, but I guess we just have to go with it because we're going to this event. So we have to have a logo for the shoe. So like, that's how it started. I mean, usually, and I call it a shitty first draft, like do that sloppy first draft that, yeah, you may not be married to it, but like, okay, $50 billion business later, it kind of worked out, right? They ended up going back and giving her a bunch of shares and everything. But
Yep.
originally the design was a $50 design. But
Yep.
yet we're told, well, you have to pay 30 grand and you have to have great branding. Yes, you have to have a vision for what it is you want to be. But don't expect, you don't have to, Rome wasn't built in a day. You need to take baby steps to get there.
Yep.
Bravo for you for keeping going. So let's finish. I know we've got to let you go, but you got a business to run. But tell everybody where you are now. Like, how you've mentioned some teams. Are you in stores? Are you online? Like, how is your product getting out into the world, and where can we find you?
Yeah, so we're sold right now. We have an online presence, but most of our business is actually selling to teams and organizations and like youth sports facilities. So we are not in retail yet, but that's kind of like designed strategically. So if you want to find us, we are online at outplayofficial.com. But we're always looking to work with new teams and facilities. And I just think that like I envisioned this brand going a certain way. When I started it, I was thinking, okay, this is really important for youth athletes. And so all of our flavors were designed for like me thinking about like a 12-year-old baseball player.
Chocolate
And
chip cookie dough.
yeah, and it just so happens that like 12-year-old baseball players and 35-year-old NFL players have
Like,
basically the same profile. Yeah. So right now, like we're working with all of these NFL teams, but still the idea of it is like if you're a youth athlete, if you are an elite athlete who like lays down every night to go to bed and is like, I want to be in the NFL, well, why not start like integrating some of the things that they're doing into your life now so that you're ahead when you get there? And I think that's been like an important thing with anything in life, not just food, is like, okay, if you have a goal, like look at those people and see what they're doing and then figure out your way and your version of that so that you're even more so prepared when you get there. So yeah, I think like the name of this business is Outplay. And I think it's been so important for me just in my personal life is like, okay, if I want to out anything. So like the logo says out, and we have water bottles. We'll have girls like fill in their version of it, and they're like, okay, out dig, out swing, out dance. And I remember one day I was working out, and I was like, I'm so tired of this workout, and I was like, no, Olivia, like my company is literally designed for me to go 110% in everything I'm doing. Like it's like you need to outwork yourself from this morning, from yesterday. And so I think just like that mindset pushes me and it can push other people. And you never know what you're capable of unless you start and unless you believe in yourself and you actually show up every single day to get there. And so I think just beyond sports nutrition, it's a really good mindset to have in everyday life for anyone. It doesn't matter if you're an athlete, a mom, a dad, like whoever it is, to convince yourself that you're capable and then to show up in everything you do is very important.
I like to say success leaves clues. So if
Yes.
you're an athlete who wants to play in the NFL, I always ask, who's your favorite athlete? What do they eat? Well, how much do they sleep? Sleep's a superpower. Are you getting, well, I'm getting 4 hours of sleep at night because I'm on my phone. Do you think that's going to get you the results you want? Right. So yeah,
Yep.
the exact same model, which is so beautiful. And for us, even as entrepreneurs, it's like, okay, I'm going to aspire to be Brene Brown, but in the meantime, I'm going to have to take 100, 1,000 steps. That's not for me to decide. All I need to know is where is my North Star? And then what is the step I need to take today in service of getting to that place?
Totally. Totally. Yep.
So fun to see you crushing it. I am so in awe of all that you do, and wow, what a gift! I mean, not a gift, but I mean, you are a gift to others because you are showing by doing, and I so admire you and all that you're doing. It's really fun to chat with you.
Thank you. Well, I same to you. Honestly, I feel like what you're doing is just allowing young girls and women and families to understand that like you can set goals and there is a path that has been paved, but if your path doesn't look like that, like it doesn't matter because you can like pave your own. And so I think it's really important for people like yourself and myself to just continue sharing and being open and vulnerable. I tell a lot of people, like, there's days where I'm like crying, like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. But you know what? You got to just like continue to believe and continue to show up and listen to people like yourself and hear other people's journeys and take little pieces of that and start to integrate that in your life. So I'm appreciative that you've let me on here today. And thank you so much.
And maybe it evolves and grows. Like you said, it might turn into something else you totally didn't foresee either. But that's kind of the fun of it, right? Is like,
Yeah.
if we knew what I think, if we knew what I'm doing 20 years from now, yawn. But if I don't know what's going to happen, because this may go off in a different tangent that I didn't anticipate. But I have a saying like that too. I want to reach more people. I want to be on, I always say I have this vision about being on a bigger stage. I don't know exactly what that means. It may not be literal, but it's, I want to help more athletes and parents and people go for what they want. And okay, if I can do that for 5 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 people, that's not for me to decide, but I just have to keep showing up. So I want to finish with one last question that we like to ask all of our guests. You can finish it however you like, a sentence, a paragraph, a word, but how would you finish the comment, the best athletes I know do this?
Um, I think the best athletes I know, like to their core, just truly believe in themselves. Like, no matter what happens in your life, like there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be things that come up that you have zero control over. But at the end of the day, like you're the one in your driver's seat and you're the one that makes the next step or can even have the goal or vision or belief system in yourself, and you can't get that from anyone else. And with social media, with everything, like you're always looking for likes and other people's opinions, but at the end of the day, like it comes down to like what you believe is capable and what you believe is right for yourself. And so I think it's just such an important part of anyone, not just youth sports, but like really you're capable of doing so much, and having the understanding of like, why not me? Like, why can't I be the next person to start the Nike of the food business? Like, why not? And so if you aren't able to believe in yourself and see yourself doing great, amazing things, then like no one else is going to put that vision in your head for you.
It's funny. I'm in a similar place. We're starting to do more sponsorships for the podcast. So it was with my team this morning. There's 3 of us talking about who would we want to have as a sponsor. And I said that, well, maybe it's a Nike or something. And my sales director said, well, that's too big. I mean, maybe you want to be like, got to pick somebody that's more our level, right? Like, so it's funny, that exact same conversation this morning. I'm like, heck no, I'm going to be on the national team. I'm going to go work for Nike. Why would I not have them sponsor me? In fact, when I wrote the book, I had a very clear vision of speaking at Nike on the Tiger Woods stage, because it was kind of going home for me, right? Like, be back on campus in October. Okay, I wasn't at the Tiger Woods stage. I was in the LeBron Innovation Center, which is also pretty freaking cool, right?
Yeah, so cool.
And I was like, when I told the group, it was all the whole innovation team. I'm like, I made it. Like, I did. I had that vision right when the first idea came about the book. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to go back and speak at Nike, right?
Yeah.
So please, if you're listening, like, take note of, this is how this works. It's not always going perfectly. And in fact, when it doesn't go well is usually that beautiful moment that you get to learn, and then you get to grow from it, and then say, okay, now what am I going to try next? And how can I keep, again, just taking little itty bitty bites of the apple to say, okay, this might be evolving into something I didn't even see coming. Yeah. And that's so exciting. So we'll put in the show notes where they can find you and reach you and follow it. And you do have a little bit of direct to consumer stuff?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Our website is direct to consumer, so you can buy it on there. And we sell them directly to teams. So if you have a team that you think wants to try them out, we'd be happy to provide samples, things like that. But But yeah, well,
Oh,
I really appreciate you coming on. You're inspiring me. I feel like I love to see women who are have big dreams and goals and can see themselves doing great things because it allows me to like reach even further in my life.
yay. Oh, likewise. This is just a thrill. So, parents, athletes, coaches, everybody who's listening to this, like and share. In the fall, here's a plug. I'm going to do this course again. We had a little beta test of it in the spring, and it's all about exactly what Olivia and I've been talking about. And again, maybe your kids are grown, or maybe you don't have kids, or maybe you're just getting out of college. It's for all of us. Like, we're all trying to figure it out, and I think it's all wayfinding, and it can become a very fun game when you don't take yourself so seriously, and you're like, oh, didn't really go the way I thought. Okay, now what, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Olivia. This was great.
Thank you so much. Have a
Yeah,
good day.
you too. Hey, Raising Athletes podcast fans. Kirsten here. And I have to share my new favorite hydration secret with you. Corvives Hydrate in pink lemonade. If you're looking for the ultimate hydration boost, this is it. Corvives Hydrate is an NSF certified for sport, trusted by 4 Major League Baseball teams and 3 military bases. With 6 grams of pure organic cane sugar, it ensures you absorb all the electrolytes you need. And get this, it has 3 times the electrolytes and 4 times less sugar than those leading brands. Plus, it's developed using the World Health Organization's standards for oral rehydration solutions, making it the equivalent of a bag of IV fluids. Best of all, there are no artificial dyes or sweeteners. It's so perfect for the entire family. You can drink it any time of day, before, during, or after workouts or sports. So say goodbye to sugary juices and hello to superior hydration with Corvives Hydrate in pink lemonade. Visit corvive.com. That's CORVIVE.com. And use promo code Kirsten. That's KIRSTEN for 30% off your order. Try it today and feel the difference.